So, have you ever found yourself sitting across from someone you care deeply about, both of you desperately wanting to connect, and yet somehow you completely miss each other? Well, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating systemic reading by Nick van den Ijzel titled Two Languages, One Wall. We're going to explore this incredibly common yet deeply painful paradox of two people yearning for closeness, but actually ending up triggering each other's absolute deepest fears instead. It's a look at how we try to protect ourselves and how we can finally actually start to understand each other. Okay, let's dive into this with a scenario that might feel a little too familiar. Two people at one table. Both want the exact same thing, connection, and yet they just don't understand each other. It isn't because they want different things, it's because they're speaking entirely different emotional languages. And the tragic core of this whole paradox? Neither person even realizes that a translation is necessary. They just assume they're speaking the same language of love. Underneath all the frustration, both individuals share the exact same underlying goal: closeness. They want to be seen, they want to be safe, and they want to be loved. The issue is that the survival strategies they use to get that closeness are just vastly different. Part 1. The desire for connection and what lies underneath it. Part 2. The language of grip, seeking connection by knowing. For the person speaking this language, connection isn't just something that naturally happens, right? It's something you have to actively secure. The language of grip is a language of constant movement. It's that late-night double text, it's mapping things out, it's the constant checking in. Now, from the outside, this might totally look like a need to control everything, but that is a massive misunderstanding. The person's nervous system is actually on high alert. Their underlying belief is literally, if I don't see it coming, I'm going to get hurt. They learned a long time ago that letting go was dangerous and that you had to work incredibly hard just to earn the right to love. So this behavior is a deeply rooted protective strategy, not some desire to dominate. Think about this absolutely profound idea for a second. The language of grip is not a character trait. It is a scar that has learned to talk. When a partner is pushing for answers, texting constantly, or trying to figure out exactly what you're thinking, they aren't just being annoying on purpose. That is their old wound trying to make sure they are safe right now, in the present moment. Moving on to part 3, the language of space. Finding connection by being. On the entirely opposite end of the spectrum, we find our second strategy. If grip is all about securing connection, space is about letting it organically arise without any force whatsoever. It's a language of being rather than doing. For the speaker of space, you don't force, you don't interrogate, and you definitely don't pin things down. The core belief here is that if a feeling is right, the knowledge will follow naturally. You just have to wait and trust. Sounds incredibly liberating and peaceful, doesn't it? But the author points out a critical shadow side. For someone who never learned how to truly let themselves be known, letting things arise can become an incredibly convenient excuse to never actually land or commit. This piece can secretly just be an absence. It acts like a wall without stones, keeping the other person completely locked out. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how perfectly these two survival strategies oppose one another. Grip seeks safety through constant movement and knowing, terrified of emptiness. Space seeks safety through stillness and waiting, absolutely terrified of pressure. They are perfect mirror opposites. And I bet you can probably guess what happens when these two completely different languages try to share a life together. Which brings us to part 4, the dangerous loop, colliding languages. When these two languages collide, they create what the author calls the dangerous loop. And this isn't just a simple miscommunication. It's a rapidly escalating cycle where both people accidentally trigger the absolute worst fears in each other. Let's walk through this incredibly predictable, almost mechanical cycle. Step 1, grip seeks closeness by asking questions and pulling the partner in. Step 2, the speaker of space feels this pull not as love but as pressure, and so they withdraw to find safety. Step 3, grip feels that withdrawal, that sudden terrifying space, as emptiness. And to grip, emptiness is the oldest danger there is. So, step 4, grip panics and pulls even harder. Which of course makes space feel even more pressure, causing them to withdraw even further. It is a perfect, agonizing loop. So the crucial point is, and this requires some radical neutrality, the loop has no perpetrator. Read that again. Nobody is at fault here. Grip isn't doing anything wrong, and space isn't doing anything wrong. Neither language is right. They are simply two people speaking their emotional mother tongue to someone who completely fails to understand it. They're both using really intelligent strategies that kept them safe in the past, but are unfortunately tearing them apart in the present. Part 5. The third speaker. The wall between us.
This brings us to a huge shift in how we view relationship problems. We have to stop looking at the other person as the obstacle. We often say to a partner, hey, you have a wall up. But systemically speaking, it's actually a shared structure. It is the solidified remains of every single conversation that ever went wrong, not just between you two, but possibly stretching back across generations. Think about it. Behind the wall of grip, there's a vulnerable part crying out, see me, but only if it's safe. And behind the wall of space, a vulnerable part is crying out, come closer, but don't force me. They both want the exact same thing, but they are terrified of the vulnerability required to actually get it.
Here's the ultimate paradox that traps so many relationships. The wall does not call out to the other, it calls to the builder itself. If you're sitting there waiting for your partner to tear down their wall before you lower yours, or if they're waiting for you to stop building, literally nothing will ever change. The key to the wall is never on the other side of the table. The key lies strictly on the inside of your own wall. Part 6, the axis and translation. Breaking the loop.
So how do we actually break this loop? We have to find a completely new place to stand. The author calls this the axis. Now, the axis isn't found by talking more or arguing better. It is the perspective of pure observation. It means stepping entirely outside the conversation. So instead of asking, why are they doing this to me? You step onto the axis and ask, I see that I am seeking grip right now. What happens inside me if I just stop? Or, I see that I am taking space. What am I avoiding by not getting closer? You neutrally observe your own pattern.
And this brilliantly illustrates why observation is so powerful. Whoever sees their language no longer speaks it blindly. Just this simple act of seeing your own pattern is the very first major interruption of that pattern. You shift from being the pattern to having a pattern. You're finally awake to it. And once you aren't speaking blindly anymore, you can actually start translating your needs to your partner. So what does true translation actually sound like? Well, for the speaker of grip, instead of demanding answers, you translate the underlying fear. You say, if I ask a lot, I am not trying to control, I am trying to feel safe. Help me with that by staying, even when I pull. You are showing your partner the vulnerable truth behind all that frantic movement. You're asking for their presence, not for control. Let's move to and see how this builds for the speaker of space. Their translation sounds like this. If I take space, I am not rejecting you. I need time to land. Help me with that by trusting, even when I am quiet. Again, two simple sentences, but they can only be spoken by someone who has first had the courage to meet themselves behind their own wall. It completely reframes the distance from a rejection into a sincere request for trust. As we wrap up this explainer, the author leaves us with some really profound questions to help us step onto that axis of observation. I want you to ask yourself honestly, where did you learn that you have to try so hard? What in your history taught you that love was something you had to completely exhaust yourself to secure? And consider this. For whom were you never good enough in the past? Whose expectations formed the blueprint for the walls you build today? Take a moment. Just let that land. Finally, when did you start believing that you always have to do it alone? Identifying the origin of these beliefs is the exact moment you locate the very first stones of your wall. You see, you don't tear down a wall all at once, and you certainly don't do it for the other person. You dismantle it one stone at a time, for yourself. And that first stone is called seeing. The loop doesn't have to be permanent. Step back, observe your language, and start translating. So the only question left to ask yourself is, which stone are you going to dismantle first?